Hello, this is Jay Mitchell, and we're back with another episode of Libertarian Censored podcast, going over all the posts on the Libertarian Censored subreddit. Let's get right into it. It's not too many new posts today, so it might be a shorter one. Next, first we have UK police drop probe into Bob Villan's chants about Israeli military from AGI.io. I think that's Al Jazeera. Yeah, it's Al Jazeera. And that's posted by Ninja Lover. And yeah, personally, I think, that you should be able to chant whatever you want to without the police coming after you for it. Ultimately, people will say whatever they want to say, and sometimes there's nothing you can do about it. I personally don't really care for Israel, but, it's interesting that this guy who appears to be a person of color is getting off, while a lot of people in the UK who post edgy stuff on social media get jail or prison time, and that just goes to show you, the state can justify doing whatever it wants to, and, ultimately, if it feels like arresting you for saying anything it can, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it since the state has a legal monopoly on the use of force, and they control the entirety of the legal systems from the courts to the prisons. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have Endless Embarrassment is just sad at this point, posted by Donald Key, and that's crosswords from the News Massacre subreddit, and that's true from Donald Trump. Merry Christmas to all, including the many sleazebags who loved Jeffrey Epstein, gave him bundles of money, went to his island, attended his parties, and thought he was the greatest guy on earth, only to drop him like a dog when things got too hot, falsely claimed that they had nothing to do with him, didn't know him, said he was a disgusting person, and then blamed, of course, President Donald J. Trump, who was actually the only one who did drop Epstein, and long before it became fashionable to do so, when their names got brought out in the ongoing radical left witch hunt, plus one low-life quote-unquote Republican Massey, and it is real that they are Democrats all. There will be a lot of explaining to do, much like there was when it was made public that the Russia hoax was a fictitious story, a total scam, and had nothing to do with Trump. The failing New York Times, along with many others, was forced to apologize for their bad and faulty election quote-unquote reporting, even to the point of losing many subscribers due to their highly inaccurate fake coverage. Now the same losers are at it again, only this time so many of their friends, mostly innocent, will be badly hurt and reputationally tarnished. But sadly, that's the way it is in the world of corrupt Democrat politics. Enjoy what may be your last Merry Christmas, President Donald J. Trump. And yeah, personally, I think the Epstein files have been so built up at this point they can really be underwhelming. And yeah, personally, I think Donald Trump is kind of implicated in the Epstein files, and that's why he's trying to play him off so much. But regardless, I think he survived worse in the past, and especially when you look at all the stuff he survived over the past decade, and he's still a politically viable candidate. So, ultimately, I think people will just move on to the next thing eventually. It's very much, reminds me of when everyone was all up in arms about net neutrality back in 2017, and then that came and went, and then people moved on to the next thing. I think that's very much what the Epstein files is going to happen to the Epstein files. Ultimately, I do think there should be consequences. But like a lot of stuff these days, there are no consequences for the rich and powerful elites, and that includes most of the U.S. government. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next we have why is the latest effort to ban stock trading in Congress is falling flat, posted from BusinessInsider.com, posted by Ninja Lover, and they added, top Democrats are now insisting that President Donald Trump and Vice President J.D. Vance also be included in the ban, a move that will likely dampen GOP support for the idea. I think we had a real path, and I think intentionally this effort from Democratic leadership has really undercut that path. Hitler Glodet said, everyone's going to be basically retreating into their partisan corners now. And yeah, personally, I think banning stock trading might sound like a good idea, but ultimately, if the government doesn't want to ban it, no one can force them to ban it. Ultimately, people are always going to act in their own self-interest, and even if they do ban stock trading, they'll probably find a way around it or do it under the table. They might instead of trading stocks directly, just tell their friends and family members to trade stocks for them. So ultimately, I think the libertarian position is, since people are always going to act in their own self-interest, that we shouldn't have the government involved in business at all. So they wouldn't have any foreknowledge when it comes to stock trading. But ultimately, the government can justify doing whatever it wants, and oftentimes there's nothing you can do about it. And if they want to do stock trading and government's pretty much all just grift anyway. Why not just grift off people for the stocks as well? And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have massive fundraising off Trump's Christmas criticism from thehill.com, posted by Donald Key. And yeah, I think that's good. It's good to it's always good to fundraise when it comes to politics. I think it can be a little bit grifty sometimes. Fundraising, I think. But if Massey wants to fundraise off of the Orange Man's going after him, I think he should be able to. But with that being said, ultimately, I do think fundraising in politics is oftentimes a lot of the times grift as well. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Next, we have the 2025 LGBTQ Year in Review, Lows, More Lows, and Rumblings of Hope from unclosetedmedia.com, posted by Knee Concussions. And they added, "This is the piece that I wrote personally, and it feels relevant to share here. These wins and losses are meted out by government institutions across the board. In the U.S., we celebrate gains with the wariness that our rights can be overturned by SCOTUS if they so choose, which they thankfully chose not to do, despite their own prior stances. We cannot rely solely on government to protect us. We must ask our fellow man to protect us from government when necessary, especially when the regressive policies being lobbied for do not reflect the will of the vast majority of the country." And yeah, personally, I would say that a lot of LGBTQ activist types like the Knee Concussions here, they always seem to think like the U.S. is going to turn into Uganda or something in regards to homosexuality any day now and make all homosexuality illegal or something. Well, in reality, I'd say that the U.S. is always pretty progressive in the world, relatively speaking, in world standards when it comes to LGBTQ issues. But regardless, I do disagree with that final point. Just because the will of the vast majority of the country says one thing doesn't mean that they have the right to enforce it on everyone. That's very much why I would say the libertarian position is to be against democracy. Libertarians should be for individual rights and voluntary collectivism rather than collective rights and forced collectivism. And that's very much what I think libertarians should support. We should support if people want to have all special privileges for LGBTQ on their own property. I think they should be able to. If they want to make LGBTQ illegal on their own property, I think they should be able to. And I think that's very much libertarian position. It depends on what the property owner wants in any given circumstance. And that's my thoughts there. Next, we have Justice Department says filming immigration raids is domestic terrorism. A leaked Justice Department memo directs federal prosecutors to press domestic terrorism charges against individuals who record immigration operations from Reason.com, posted by CH4Locks, and that's crosspost from the We the Fifth subreddit. And yeah, personally, I wouldn't say filming government aid employees as terrorism, especially if they're on the job. I think that's more so holding them accountable. But ultimately, the government has the legal monopoly to force to define words like terrorism, however it feels like. And if they want to say that filming them is terrorism, they have the legal monopoly to force to justify enforcing that. And that's my thoughts on that issue. Then we have another post I want to do, the Libertarian Party USA subreddit I made. I said, let's talk about the differences between IRL debates and social media debates. And I said, so yesterday I asked an old Reddit acquaintance from here if they wanted to try doing an offline debate after debating exclusively on Reddit for years. They didn't seem to respond by the request, and that got me thinking as to why. In the past, I viewed social media such as Reddit to be the superior form of debate, but increasingly I view IRL debates to be the far superior ones. Reddit and other social media might be easier to access and find people with similar or dissenting opinions, but oftentimes they don't have to put their money where their mouth is, so to say, and they don't have to attach their name or face to their posts and comments. If you don't want to do that, it's fine. But as we saw recently with revealing countries where accounts are based in, a lot of those tend to be foreign actors and/or bots. Censorship is also a reason why I think that IRL debates tend to be better than social media debates. The free speech internet of the past is long gone at this point, especially when it comes to Reddit. And when it comes to IRL, the only way to really get censorship is through physical force. See Charlie Kirk, which is a lot harder to do, especially if you don't have the power of the state on your side. Of course, it might not always be convenient to debate IRL in comparison to social media, but I definitely think the benefits are more than worth it. Thoughts? And then what's one guy said, we're talking in 23, well, I'd agree. Additionally, a good IRL debate is more likely to cause the debaters to better understand deeper assumptions or perceived notions on which they base their opinions. In Reddit style or online debates, you have time to look up the data that supports your point of view, and more likely to end up reinforcing your biases instead of uncovering them. I said I would agree with that. I don't think a lot of voters could survive a good faith IRL debate outside of their echo chambers. It would very much be a fish out of water moment for them. And yeah, that's my thoughts there. If people, I think social media really isn't a good place for debate, and I think the history of it's really proven it at this point. I think it's just going to end up being echo chambers of people kind of just ideologically masturbating themselves, and that's why I think we should try and get more IRL debates, even if it might be harder to do so. And that's my thoughts on that issue. So I think we're gonna wrap it up there. I'll see you guys in the next episode. Bye.